Should the Brooklyn Nets trade Kyrie Irving? Let's get into this. Quickly before we get the video started, if you guys enjoyed this video and want to see more NBA content just like this one, hit that subscribe button and that post notification bell. Anyways, back to the video. This is an extremely exciting time not only for Brooklyn Nets players, but also for all the Brooklyn Nets fans around the world. Last season was a disappointing season for the Brooklyn Nets and their players because they were favored and projected to win the NBA championship last year, but of course that didn't happen, and they ended up losing in 7 games to the Milwaukee Bucks. Now we would have not known what would have happened, but in my opinion, if the Brooklyn Nets players weren't injured in terms of Kyrie Irving and also James Harden, although Harden did play in that Bucks series, he was clearly injured and not playing well, but if those two players were healthy in that playoff series, in my opinion, I think they would have beat the Milwaukee Bucks and probably beat the Atlanta Hawks as well and made it all the way to the NBA Finals, and who knows what would have happened from there. If I had to pick, I probably would say the Nets would have won that, and they probably would have won the NBA championship if everybody was healthy. But with that being said, there's really no way of knowing. That's just my projection, that's just my opinion. Even if all three of those guys were healthy, maybe they still lose to the Milwaukee Bucks, or maybe they get past the Bucks and lose to the Hawks, or maybe they get past the Hawks and lose to the Suns. There's really no way of telling what would have happened. But the silver lining of the Nets losing last season and not winning the championship was not necessarily due to their play on the court when everybody was healthy. If that were the case, they would really have to do some soul searching and figure everything out. But it appears to me that when everybody was healthy and playing at the same time, the Nets were probably the most unstoppable team in the NBA by far. So you would assume if all three of these guys go into the NBA playoffs healthy, they would be able to win an NBA championship this year. But now the real question is, with all the issues going around about Kyrie Irving and the Brooklyn Nets based around the vaccine, would Kyrie Irving even be playing during the regular season, or would he only be playing during the regular season at away games? Is that even sustainable? Or if he's not playing during the regular season whatsoever, would he be there by the playoffs, or would he not even be there by the playoffs and just not play during the season whatsoever? What's going to happen with Kyrie Irving? Now I think this goes without saying, but when Kyrie Irving is on the court for the Nets, they have a much better chance of winning the championship. And if Kyrie doesn't play next season, and more importantly, if he doesn't play during the NBA playoffs next season, the Brooklyn Nets are certainly going to take a big hit in terms of their chances to win an NBA championship. When you still look at the roster, luckily they have 3 superstars and they would still have Kevin Durant and James Harden, which is still crazy. Both of those two guys are absolute superstars, and you can honestly make a case that Kevin Durant is the best player in the NBA and James Harden is not too far behind him. So there's still a possibility, and a really good possibility at that those two stars alone, with all the other good players they have on the roster, in terms of the role players they have built around these two guys, can still win an NBA championship. It's just the odds of them doing so would be a lot lower, and obviously it would just be a lot more difficult to win an NBA championship without that true third star in Kyrie Irving, who's proven the ability to play not only in the playoffs, but proven the ability to play in the NBA Finals at the highest level. But now the real question is, should the Brooklyn Nets actually decide to trade Kyrie Irving away, either for an all-star in return that's maybe not as good as Kyrie, but it's guaranteed that player will be playing for you during the regular season and in the NBA playoffs when it matters most, barring any injuries of course, or maybe you trade Kyrie Irving away for a bunch of players in return and get some nice young talent in terms of starting level talent, maybe just role players coming off the bench as well, some first round picks maybe in return as well for Kyrie, and just really replenish all that depth that you traded away in the James Harden trade. Now this situation is actually a lot more complicated than just the Nets looking out and saying, oh, we want to trade Kyrie Irving and get this player in return because this player would give us the best opportunity to win a championship in our opinion. It's a little bit more complicated than that, and the reason is because of Kevin Durant. Now maybe not a lot of people know this, but originally when KD decided to sign with the Brooklyn Nets, the only way he was actually going to sign there was if the Nets also took in Kyrie Irving. KD was not going to come to the Nets or any team without Kyrie. They were a package deal and they were very good friends at the time and still are, and they always wanted to play together, and that was their opportunity. So that was the reason Kyrie went to the Nets, because actually the Nets didn't even want to bring in Kyrie at the time. They just wanted KD, not Kyrie. And also KD has a ton of influence on this organization, because if you piss off KD, then he could potentially ask for a trade down the line, and of course as your best player you don't want that. So that's why I'm saying this situation is a little more tricky, because if you want to trade Kyrie, let's say the Nets want to trade Kyrie because they think it gives them the best opportunity to win an NBA championship. Maybe they already had discussions with another team, or maybe they think they can make a trade for a certain player that they really like and think that guy guy would help them win a championship, they have to go and ask Kevin Durant for his approval, because if KD doesn't want the Nets to trade Kyrie, they kinda can't. But on the other hand, if for whatever reason, I'm not saying this is true, there's no rumors about this, and I don't think this would happen, but if KD told the Nets he actually wanted Kyrie to get traded, Kyrie probably would get traded, to be honest. KD just has so much influence within the organization, and actually one of the biggest examples of how much influence KD had within this organization is when the Nets had both DeAndre Jordan and Jared Allen. Now, in my opinion, and probably in most people's opinion, Jared Allen is clearly the better player than DeAndre Jordan. He's younger, and overall he's just better. But KD, and also Kyrie to a certain extent as well, but mostly KD wanted DeAndre Jordan to start on the team over Jared Allen because they had a very close relationship and they were just very good friends. But the head coach at the time actually wanted Jared Allen to start. But KD had so much influence within the organization that he actually got DeAndre Jordan to start over Jared Allen and got DeAndre a lot more minutes, even though Jared Allen was clearly the better player. So that kind of shows you, even if the Nets don't think it gives them the best opportunity to win, they would listen to KD, and just shows how much influence he has. But now let's just say, for the sake of the video, that KD goes to the Nets. He doesn't say he wants Kyrie traded, but he also says he would be okay if the Nets did trade Kyrie. What should the Nets actually do? Now, if you're even considering trading Kyrie, you have to be very careful, especially what you get in return. But if you're actually willing to trade a guy as good as Kyrie is one of the best scorers we have in the NBA. The two guys that are probably on top of him are on his team, James Harden and Kevin Durant. But what Kyrie could do on the offensive side of the ball is just remarkable. He's a great three-point shooter, great mid-range shooter, can get all the way to the basket, probably the best finishing ability from a point guard or in general in the NBA. We all know what he can do in clutch situations. In the fourth quarter, he always hits those game winners, game tying shots during the regular season, and when it comes down to the playoffs, we know what he can do in the playoffs, and when it comes down to the finals, we also know what he could do in the finals after he hit that extremely clutch three-point shot in game 7 when he was on the Cavs versus the Warriors. We all know that crazy three-point jump shot that he hit. What Kyrie provides to an NBA team once he's actually on the court is just fantastic. There's not too many players that provide more than Kyrie does for you. So if the Nets were willing to trade Kyrie, or even thinking about trading Kyrie, you have to realize that whatever player you're going to get in return is not going to be as good as Kyrie Irving is. Maybe at the very best, the Nets can get an all-star player in return, maybe a point guard or whatever position, but more likely what the Nets will get in return for Kyrie is just a bunch of role players and maybe some starting level talent that are young players and could eventually turn into something better. But when you also consider what the Nets are right now, they're certainly in win now mode. So I don't know if you necessarily want that package, and you'd probably rather get an all-star right now rather than the draft picks, the young players, and all the players in return. But at the same time, that could still help you, because now you replenish your bench unit and you have KD and James Harden in the starting lineup just cooking everybody that's defending them, and then you can actually feel comfortable taking those guys out, because when you actually go to your bench unit, you still have some really nice young players. But if the Nets are comfortable with trading Kyrie and they're aware that they're going to get players in return that aren't nearly as good as Kyrie is, then maybe you can do it. But if you're asking my opinion to whether I think the Nets should keep Kyrie or trade Kyrie if everything was good with KD and he was okay with it, I would personally say you should probably keep Kyrie. No matter what happens with Kyrie, I think he's just too good of a player. When you talk about how those three guys were playing last season, KD, Kyrie, and James Harden, when they were all healthy on the court together, they were the most scary team in the NBA, and it wasn't even close. A lot of people thought when these three guys originally teamed up that there wouldn't be enough basketballs for them, and they're just ball hogs and they just wouldn't play well together whatsoever, but it was actually the complete opposite. They all completely bought in. They would let KD cook, and then Kyrie and James Harden would be in the corner spotting up, and either KD would cook his guy or he would actually pass the ball around and get it to James Harden or Kyrie or another guy on his team, and vice versa. Kyrie would cook sometimes, Harden would cook sometimes, and they were just a very efficient unit on the offensive side. And when everybody's buying in like that, when you have a team with three absolute superstars who are all amazing on the offensive side of the ball, probably the 1, 2, 3 players in terms of their offensive skill sets, that's basically impossible to stop. So if it were up to me, I would probably say keep Kyrie Irving. He's just too good of a talent to trade, in my opinion. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you guys think the Nets should trade Kyrie Irving, or do you think the Nets should keep Kyrie? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, please leave a like and subscribe and hit that post notification bell. It really helps me out a lot. Until the next time, peace out, guys.